The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Today is Monday, February 27th, 2023. Thank you so much for joining me. Last week, I covered in our patrons only episode the racist remarks of Dilbert comic strip creator Scott Adams. And apparently we were a few days ahead of the news cycle because it has picked up tremendous steam over the weekend as the rest of the world has finally caught up to what he said on his YouTube stream. Now, I got it the morning after he streamed it because that's my world, the YouTube and Twitter and social media. So that's we move at the speed of information. And it's one of the reasons you should go to patreon.com/the BPD show, where you get access to what we cover in our patrons only episode. We were on top of this before everybody. And I will play the clip as I did last week, just so that you can get a taste of it. But the repercussions have started to come in. I want to read from CBS News. Dilbert's distributor cuts ties to comic strips creator over his racist remarks, or remarks about race, rather. Dilbert comic strip creator Scott Adams experienced possibly the biggest repercussion of his recent comments about race when distributor Andrew McMill Universal announced Sunday it would no longer work with the cartoonist. Andrew McMill chairman Hugh Andrews said CEO and president Andy Serian said in a joint statement that the syndication company was severing our relationship with Adams. In the February 22nd episode of his YouTube show, Adams described people who are black as members of a, quote, hate group from which white people should, quote, get away. Various media publishers across the U.S. denounced the comments as racist, hateful, and discriminatory while saying they would no longer provide a platform for his work. Again, we covered this on the 23rd in our patrons only episode. And you know, it really is something I can give you the gist of what we said already. It's simply this. Scott Adams is a rich, privileged white man with nothing to do but sit around and find something to be angry about. That's it. He has everything in the world that he would ever have wanted or needed, had access, privilege, wealth, and reach. And yet he decides to commit a portion of his life to being a full blown bigoted, conspiracy anti-vax person. It's, when most of us get a moment of free time, at least I did, when the pandemic hit and we all shut down. And I finally, for the first time in my adult life, had a minute to breathe where I wasn't working 70 hours a week, or I wasn't driving all over the city to get to one appointment to the next, to do this job or the next. The pandemic really slowed me down. Most of us, when we get a moment of freedom, we find peace, because most of us aren't looking for someone to blame all of our problems on. We simply just want to get enough money to get by and have a little bit of peace. Well, we're dealing with a race and a breed of people in white, conservative, right-wing, extremist men who, no matter how much they accumulate, they have all the wealth they need. The richest, take all the way to Elon Musk, who is supporting Dilbert, the Dilbert creator, in this, so much so that on Twitter, Elon Musk is calling the media racist in their response to what has happened to Scott Adams. Right. So it doesn't matter whether you are a thousandaire, 100,000aire, multimillionaire, or a billionaire. When we see far right wing conservative men, white men particularly, when they have this amount of wealth, they have this freedom, they literally can do anything in the world they want. They choose to double down on their hatred and their bigotry and their racism. And then when their career implodes because of their racist remarks, all of a sudden the world is woke and cancel culture has run amok. None of them ever want to be held accountable for their words and what they do. They simply want to be able to express their childlike anger and point it at any scapegoat they can point it at. And if you really sit down and pause and reflect on what they have to be angry about, white men have nothing to be angry about in this country. Period. Now, again, going back to why Scott Adams got himself in trouble, we went over it in the Patrons Only episode on the 23rd. I'm going to keep dropping that there because I do like to emphasize the fact that this show, as unconventional as it is, we stay on the front edges of the news. What you hear here generally becomes mainstream news later because we're so fast on the trigger on covering these stories. And what got Scott Adams in trouble last week was a Rasmussen poll that asked specifically several questions. Number one, the one that freaked him out, was the question that was asked to 1,000 black people across the country, random selected, as much as you can trust Rasmussen. It's a decent poll. It usually skews towards the right a little bit, but they asked 1,000 black people what they felt about this specific phrase, quote unquote, "it's okay to be white." Now, here's where Rasmussen and the general coverage of this story has failed miserably. That phrase, "it's okay to be white," is an intentional propaganda tool. It is a slogan. It is sloganeering, as James Kleinburn would say. It is a slogan that was created in response to the Black Lives Matter movement. Because, as we know in this country, if anything is done to help black people, then the grievance crowd of white supremacy will jump up and say, whoa, wait a minute. What about us? Because for them, equality is oppression. Key point. For white supremacists in this country, like Scott Adams and the rest of the Get Along gang, they see any move towards equality or progress as their own type of oppression. And so they conjured up right-wing extremist groups, think tanks. They conjured up how they can respond to the Black Lives Matter movement. One of those responses was the slogan, "It's okay to be white." 1,000 black people were asked that question. What do you think about that? What are your sentiments about that? 21% said they weren't sure how they felt about it. And I think 26% said that they rejected it and they thought it was a bad slogan, which in context for where it came from and how it is applied, used as a cudgel, as a wedge to stop progress for black people, it's absolutely not an okay slogan. Is it okay for you in your existence to be a white person as much as it is okay for me to be a black person, as much as it is for a gay person to be gay, for a trans person to be trans? You are who you are. Okay? Simple as that. Is it okay, or am I okay with a slogan that is used, all lives matter, for example? Is it true that all lives matter? For a person like me who is a kind, gentle-hearted, I meditate hours every day that I can get a chance to. I am a coexistence, kumbaya kind of person. Do all lives matter? Of course, all lives matter. Is all lives matter an intentional slogan used to detract from the movement, and not only to detract, but to deter and to harm the Black Lives Matter movement? Yes, that is exactly what it is. And so do I run around saying all lives matter? No. When people say all lives matter, if we contextualize it, they're doing harm to the Black Lives Matter movement. That is their intention. I don't care how innocuous your little slogans sound. We understand intention. You cannot remove intention from what you are doing. And while Republicans and conservatives, white supremacists would love for us to live in this obtuse world where nuance is only applied to their agenda, where context is only given to their statements, we understand the reality of every game they're trying to play. And so when they created the slogan, quote unquote, "it's okay to be white," it was an intentional affront, response, reaction. They are reactionaries after all. It was an intentional reaction to push back against the Black Lives Matter movement. And that's what Scott Adams saw. So he put 21% and 26% together of black people who were either unsure about that poll, or black people who are unsure about that statement, or black people who outright reject the statement, quote unquote, "it's okay to be white." He took that and decided to say this.
So if nearly half of all blacks are not okay with white people, according to this poll, not according to me, according to this poll, that's a hate group. That's a hate group. And I don't want to have anything to do with them. And I would say, based on the current way things are going, the best advice I would give to white people is to get the hell away from black people. Just get the fuck away. Wherever you have to go, just get away. Because there's no fixing this. This can't be fixed. Right? This can't be fixed. You just have to escape. So that's what I did. I went to a neighborhood where, I have a very low black population.
And then he goes on to make his case for segregation, but instead of being a brave racist in the order of Nick Fuentes, I mean, one thing I give Nick is he's brave with his racism. Scott Adams, instead of just outright advocating for segregation, he then hides behind Don Lemon and something Don Lemon said about living around black people. So he had to hide. So he's not, he was tiptoeing into the water of full blown Klansmanship. And well, you might as well have jumped all the way in because he's been canceled by his distributors and others. And quite right, because this is first of all, it is regardless of the question that was asked by the poll, his interpretation of it was specifically to give him the most latitude to be angry as possible. He made himself angry. See how he made the leap from the original question in the poll, which was, what are your thoughts about the phrase, it's okay to be white, right? He jumped from that to saying black people are not okay with white people to give himself the most latitude possible to say as many racist things as he thought he could get away with. Now, I want to give you a little bit more background on the actual phrase, it's okay to be white, because I don't want you to just take my word for it, even though my memory is spectacular and I never forget where a slogan came from. The phrase, I'm reading from the Anti-Defamation League, ADL.org. The phrase, it's okay to be white, is a slogan popularized in late 2017 as a trolling campaign by members of the controversial discussion forum 4chan. The original idea behind the campaign was to choose an ostensibly innocuous and inoffensive language, put that slogan on flyers bereft of any other words or imagery, then place the flyers in public locations. Originators assumed that quote-unquote liberals would react negatively to such flyers and condemn them or take them down, thus, quote unquote, proving that liberals did not even think it was okay to be white. You can check that out on Anti-Defamation League, ADL.org. So again, the fact that no one in the media is giving that context, no one, I haven't really seen that anywhere. I just pulled that from my memory, and then a quick search revealed that my memory is accurate. Again, all the more reason. I'm doing shameless plugs this morning. I must need patrons. Patreon.com/the BPD show, where you get access to analyses that are ahead of the curve and that are deep in nuance, and you don't get any commercials. In a new poll, Donald Trump is crushing Ron DeSantis, Fox's new 2024 survey, and immediately after that, DeSantis is crushing everyone else. I'm reading from Mediaite. Former President Donald Trump and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis topped a new Fox News poll of 2024 Republican candidates out on this past Sunday. Out of a list of 15 potential candidates, respondents in the poll prefer Trump to most with 43% support. Just behind him was DeSantis at 28%. That's not really just behind him, but okay, that is second place. Trump has officially announced his 2024 candidacy, while DeSantis has only been rumored at this point. Now, I want to play a clip for you. We've been covering how Fox News, Rupert Murdoch, they have decidedly moved away from Donald Trump, really attacking Donald Trump simply by telling the truth. I want to be sure, as I use that phrase, Fox News is attacking Donald Trump. The only thing they had to do to attack Donald Trump was to tell the truth. For example, they called out the reality of why there was a train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, The reason this is Fox News, right? Fox News did this better than anyone else last week. The reason there was a train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, that became toxic was because Norfolk Southern and other train companies lobbied the Trump administration to loosen regulations. And that's exactly what the Trump administration did. The specific regulations that would have prevented the derailment. Now, that was reported by Fox News. It was seen as an attack on Donald Trump, but all they had to do was tell the truth. All of that context to say this: Fox News has chosen their horse in the 2024 election. It is Ron DeSantis. So while they are, quote unquote, attacking Donald Trump simply by telling the truth, they are running flattering campaigns on their network, biographies and interviews of Ron DeSantis. Here is a clip of one of those flattering documentaries about Ron DeSantis that includes none other than Jeb, please clap, Bush, who ran for president himself in 2016, the primaries of 2015, and lost, former governor of the state of Florida. And here's what he had to say, basically endorsing Ron DeSantis for president. Listen in.
I think is pretty remarkable.
And he hasn't declared yet. Many in the Republican Party hope he soon will. Is this Ron DeSantis' opportunity to run for higher office?
I think it is. He's been a really effective governor. He's young. I think we're on the verge of a generational change in our politics. I kind of hope so. I think it's time for a more forward-leaning, future-oriented conversation in our politics as well.
Which has made him, should he choose to run for president, a serious contender in Republican politics.
And who better to do it than someone who's been outside of Washington, who's governed effectively, who I think has shown that Florida could be a model for the future of our country.
Isn't that inspiring? The music was just so poignant and climactic. It was really, I mean, Fox is rolling out the red carpet for Ron DeSantis. Obviously, I'm not going to miss the fact that establishment types like Jeb Bush, the Bush family, they have thrown their lot behind Ron DeSantis because, well, the Bush family obviously rejected Donald Trump, except for those tax breaks that he gave them. But I digress. They want someone who is less bombastic, is putting it nicely. But this is, let's just be clear about something. Ronald DeSantis is a fascist. And I'm sure George W. is in on this as well, but Jeb Bush has endorsed a fascist for president. Now, I don't care how beautiful the music was and how patriotic they make it sound and how well dressed up they can get and how poised and civil they can behave as compared to Donald Trump. I know Donald Trump was an oafish, buffoonish clown who put on a spectacle of the likes we haven't seen in our lifetime. But Ron DeSantis is a dedicated racist. He is so dedicated to his racism that when he was a teacher for only 1 year, he taught so many pro-slavery and pro-Confederacy lessons that his students mocked him, pointing out his inaccurate lessons about pro-Confederacy, pro-Confederate and pro-slavery inaccurate lessons. Check out the New York Times article on that. They also mention about how he was an adult partying with high school girls, but that's a whole different conversation for another day. He is a committed and a devout racist. He has no problem with authoritarianism. Look at how he is banning books all across the state of Florida. Bookshelves are emptying out. He has no problem digging into the wedge issue simply as a distraction so that he can give away billions of dollars to corporations like Publix. So I just want to make sure people understand that no matter how mild he may seem in comparison to Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis is the more devoted racist and fascist. In fact, he is so committed to his fascism that Donald Trump is having to play catch up. Donald Trump is having to double down on his bigotry in order to appeal to the Nazi crowd that is supporting Ron DeSantis. We saw that in an episode about 3 weeks ago when I played you the extended clip and we took it piece by piece of what Donald Trump was doing to mirror Ron DeSantis' racism in order to get ahead of him in the 2024 election. And so I want people to understand this. Out of everything that I said, this is the reason I'm covering this particular story. The establishment Republican Party, best represented by the likes of George W. Bush, Jeb Bush, Dick Cheney, Liz Cheney, while they may have opposed Donald Trump, they do not oppose the authoritarianism and the creeping fascism of Ron DeSantis. They are supporting him. They will be supporting him. I guarantee you, as this election gets closer and closer, the likes of Liz Cheney, she will absolutely fall in line behind Ron DeSantis in order to oppose Donald Trump. But Ron DeSantis is the clear and present threat to democracy, even more so than Donald Trump, because Donald Trump was too much of a moron to be able to accomplish his goals. Ron DeSantis is a meticulous, calculating monster who served as a JAG officer that oversaw the torture of detainees at Guantanamo Bay. Check out the podcast from the Real News Network, where they played interviews from detainees that sat across the table from Ron DeSantis, who they said with their own mouths got a certain amount of joy, a certain smile on his face when he sat down with detainees in underneath the auspices of being a quote unquote human rights supervisor. He was able to facilitate, or to rather supervise, some of the worst torture that we have had in this country. That's who Jeb Bush just endorsed for president. That's who the establishment, the Republican establishment, that's who Fox News is getting behind 100%. And so while everyone is still keeping a side eye at Donald Trump because he is a threat, he needs to be held accountable for January 6th, let's remember there is an extension of this coup that is still going on, and it's going on through the establishment Republican Party, through the likes of Ron DeSantis, and it just got a stamp of approval from the likes of Jeb Bush. So always remember, there is no such thing as a moderate Republican when it really comes down to it.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and get twice the content and unfiltered interviews without any of the commercial interruptions. Welcome back to The Benjamin Dixon Show. Visit us online at thebenjamindixonshow.com.
Welcome back. Welcome back. So, remember when Elon took over Twitter and everyone was like, oh, the people who are getting fired are just the ones who didn't want to go hardcore parkour and sleep on the office floor overnight? Well, there were a couple employees who tried to show that they were committed to this new hardcore level of not going home and just sleeping at the office and getting work done, because as we all know, that's the only way to be effective in a capitalist system, especially one that's run by a son of an apartheid baron. Okay. It did not work out well for one employee in particular who tweeted out photos of her sleeping on the floor at the headquarters of Twitter. And now I'm not reveling in the fact that she has now been fired. I really just want to point out the fact that you cannot appease people like Elon Musk. The goal was never about getting the employees to work harder, right? It was about his agenda. I want to read from Gizmodo. Elon Musk lays off Twitter employee who slept on the floor to meet his crazy deadlines. Product manager Esther Crawford was all in on Musk's hardcore Twitter. It didn't matter to the billionaire in the end. This is written by Jody Serrano. Twitter CEO Elon Musk has a message for employees. Loyalty means nothing. Over the weekend, Musk laid off more than 50 employees at the social media company, including one of his most vocal supporters, product head Esther Crawford. Crawford famously made headlines back in November when she, quote, tweeted a photo of herself sleeping at the office days after Musk took over Twitter in order to meet his crazy deadlines. Despite criticism from folks who said Musk was making Twitter employees work around the clock to prove themselves, Crawford took this in stride, stating at the time that, quote, doing things hard requires sacrifice. Or rather, quote, doing hard things requires sacrifice. I love how I add extra words when I read sometimes. There should be something to worker solidarity, right? You really should stand with labor when things go down like this. In her own way, she was being a scab, in my opinion, along with a couple of other people. I mean, there are those employees at Twitter who are being held hostage because of their visa situations. And if they were to leave Twitter, they absolutely would either have to find another employment or leave the country. Right. And those employees, unfortunately, are honestly being held hostage by Elon Musk. They have to do whatever he says. They have to just go with whatever he says so they can keep their job. That wasn't her case. Her case was trying to outshine and be more hardcore than everyone else and try to be down with the boss's agenda. I mean, look, I do blame her, but I get the idea. I don't agree with the idea. I think you should stand with labor. I think you should stand with your employees. Solidarity has its purposes, right? It's solidarity is a thing for a reason, so that you don't find yourself out there by yourself on a limb, thinking that you are special, thinking that you can appease a dictator, thinking that you can satisfy a person who's clearly made it. They can't be. Elon Musk can't be satisfied because he really just doesn't know what he's doing with Twitter. He just kind of bought it on a whim. He bought it on a whim, and now he's trying to craft something out of it to make good on this $44 billion purchase that he tried to get out of. Why would you, as an employee of Twitter, put yourself on the line for someone like that, trusting someone like that, only to get fired later on? So, again, I'm not reveling in the fact that she got fired. I am most certainly pointing out the fact that, one, solidarity is critical in the workplace. Don't ever let a manager fool you into thinking that somehow you standing by yourself is better for you as an employee than you standing with a group. Now, generally speaking, those groups would be unions, but the tech industry has had a record of not unionizing. Okay. So they didn't have a union to defend them at Twitter. And, she certainly didn't have anyone to stand with her after she didn't stand with those that left. I want to leave the public show with a clip of actor Bryan Cranston. This is an interview he did on Fox, and it is a short clip, but it really, I think it's a great clip. Take a listen in as he questions how we as humanity got to a place where we can enslave people. And, that's a bigger, broader conversation. Obviously, we could discuss that, but I do like specifically what he said about why Make America Great Again can be and should be considered racist.
How did we get to a point where we treated other human beings as slaves and we're okay with that? When I see the Make America Great Again, my comment is, do you accept that could possibly be construed as a racist remark? And most people, a lot of people go, how could that be racist? Make America great again? I said, so just ask yourself from an African-American experience, when was it ever great in America for the African-American? When was it great? So if you're making it great again, it's not including them. So it's to teach us in the woke world to open up and accept the possibilities that our privilege has created blind spots for us. And maybe I haven't seen what is really happening yet in all my years.
This I think was why. Now don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this to be petty. I just want to clarify that these are statements that have generally been spoken by Black people for a very long time, specifically in the last few years, as we explain the problem with these things. I'm glad to hear that he listened to someone. Thank you. For the love of God, please. I would that more white people would hear Black folks as we say these things and then put it into your own words and put it and contextualize it for your own experience. And I honestly believe this is why we have an all-out war against quote unquote wokeness, because there is an awakening happening. And it is an awakening to the atrocities and the problem of white supremacy and how that problem is still here and how that problem must be dealt with if we are to move forward as human beings. Patrons, stay tuned. There's more for you. Everyone else, go to patreon.com/the BPD show to get access to it. If not, I will see you tomorrow.